Hello, my name is Malcolm Sullivan. The company I work for is M-Trading. Today is about project finance. Every day we come into contact with and use the services produced by projects. We use water, we use gas, and we use electricity. We ride on public transport, we use roads. We use information technology. These are just examples, as well as using social services like building and maintaining schools and hospitals, where we come into contact with projects. These major projects that are part of our daily lives have to be financed. Historically, much of this would have been done through a government or a public utilities resources or through investments by private sector companies, whether it's in the form of debt or equity or other financial instruments. Particularly in the last 30 years, however, many large-scale projects have been financed using project finance. So what is project finance? Well, in textile terms, it's a method of finance where a special purpose legal entity, normally a company, is established for the sole purpose of the specific project. The repayment of the debt and return to the investors in the project are solely dependent on the revenues generated by the project, together with any support provided by third parties, such as partial risk guarantees. If we're talking about areas such as social infrastructure projects, hospitals and schools for example, these are typically supported by performance-based, long-term purchase, offtake, availability payments. Project finance is more than a financing technique, however. So the principles can be used in financing expansion projects. For example, you may have recently been at an airport when expansion has been financed using the techniques of project finance. So, why is project finance being used? Well, number one, governments might have run out of money. They've got constraints in developing new projects and they need financing to maintain public infrastructure or to develop it. Secondly, risk sharing between the private and the public sector in the form of public-private partnerships, or because the scale of projects is so large that risks need to be shared and mitigated. Thirdly, support for equipment sales. For example, a turbine manufacturer for a renewable energy project also providing some financing or financing support. And lastly, a way for companies to increase growth through investment in projects which have long-term contracted cash flows. So, is there any demand for project finance? Well, if we look at project finance as a technique, there are numerous examples where it can be used. Just think about the need to upgrade aging infrastructure in major cities or to bring more power to Africa. So, what's the process? Well, the process normally is going to start off with an economic development plan in the country. How much roads do we need, how much power and so on, or corporate strategy. For public infrastructure, the process leading to the financing methods will start with an economic development plan. In companies, there's going to be a company strategic plan. Then there's got to be a decision on the general approach to implementing and structuring projects. For example, do we use public-private partnerships? And where concessions such as BOOT schemes, build, own, operate and transfer schemes are being used, we've got to discuss things like length and terms of the concession, proposed method of financing, and in the private sector, whether corporate finance techniques will be used or project-specific financing. Then the business analysis. Well, is the project financially and technically viable? Then the bidding process, because we want to make sure that there's value for money and open and transparent bidding. Then the arrangement of the financing and the construction of the operation. So once the suppliers have been selected and financing choices have been made, the project be constructed, followed by the operations. If the project is operating under a concession, the terms of the concession may require that the project assets revert to the owner of the concession at the end of the concession period. If we had maybe things like oil and gas, for example, then there may be clean-up costs, environmental impacts. So who's involved? Now, where project finance is used, the parties involved can be classified into, number one, public sector entities, the government, a municipality or regulators. Number two, parties involved in the implementation and operation of the project. For example, contractors, suppliers and purchasers. Thirdly, the advisors, technical advisors, law firms and accounting firms. And fourthly, the financing sources, both debt and equity. Now, the financial structure can be quite complex, so you'll see a range of institutions depending on the project, development, financial institutions, export credit agencies, commercial banks, and we'll see maybe on the larger transactions, bond investors. Increasingly, we'll be seeing infrastructure funds. What are the trends? Well, following the credit crisis, we don't tend to see banks being quite as active as they are, although they are by far the predominant source of financing. And we do see more and more alternative lenders. I hope this introduction is useful. The next time you see a pothole on the road, think an airport is crowded, can't get an internet connection, or experience a failure in the power generation system, project finance may be a way to deal with those problems.